Hello, my name is Christophe Kargati. I am a senior policy analyst at the Center for Data Innovation. Thank you everyone for being there. We will participate to a public conference on how can Europe exchange the benefits of AI-enabled healthcare. So we have four speakers, very great speakers. First, we have speaker MEP, Maria Manuel Leito Marquez. Thank you for being there. Special Committee on Artificial Intelligence in a Digital Age. Then we have two members of the Commission under Elustondo Gioricchi, who will speak about the data aspect. And we have Janos Tolias, who will speak about the AI aspect. Then we have Professor Elmar Kotter, chairperson of the European Society of Radiology, eHealth, and Informatics subcommittees. And then we have Chris Walker, chair of the Working Group on Digital Health, European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Association, and vice president, European R&D, head of regulatory affairs, and UK seat head. So thank you very much for being there. The public event will be held in the following way. We will have four questions, which are main speakers. Each speaker will speak around a question during 10 minutes. And then I will open the floor for a Q&A, for a 20-minute Q&A. Please, if you have any question, please ask on Slido or on YouTube. So I will open the floor for the first question, which Chris Walker as the main speakers. So, Chris Walker, what are digital healthcare services? What is the role of artificial intelligences in those services?
Thanks, Christophe, and hello to everyone online who's watching. So, digital healthcare services, I think, is a very broad term. It includes a range of applications for digital and technology in the health setting. So that's a very broad terminology. I think we've all started to rely on digital and technology in new ways, especially during recent COVID times, and that definitely includes healthcare. So increasingly much of our healthcare information is gathered or stored electronically, and artificial intelligence, I think, can help us to process and interpret that information. So let me just give you a couple of examples, as you've asked. Firstly, maybe evaluating patients electronically is something we're already doing. We're using technology and devices like wearables that can monitor us on an ongoing basis. And this means this can be done remotely, and then the data shared with our doctor. And this ongoing and live monitoring capability, I think, increases our ability to predict when the next healthcare event might occur, maybe intervene earlier or respond more rapidly. We've gone from the days of written patient records to more electronic healthcare records. So that's another element, I think, storing information about patients, allowing that to be accessed by our healthcare professionals. Next piece may be improving drug discovery, connecting information like genetics and disease level information to help us make better drug candidates targeted at the right subset of patients, a little bit more personalized. Maybe another one would be assisting in disease diagnosis, where we're already seeing computers playing a role, maybe training a computer to do something like reviewing X-ray scans, looking for anomalies that humans might miss. Or maybe a second one, looking for trends in our data where we can predict disease or likely progression. You know, technology is helping in so many different ways. It's hard to list all of them. So I'm maybe just going to finish on one last one before I turn to your second part of the question, and then open to the rest of the panel to give their views too. So the last one I'm going to bring, I think, is one of the most interesting, which is connecting all the different data sets together, connecting real world data about disease, about patients, basically leveraging our prior experience so that we can make better treatment decisions. And I think that's what this topic really wraps up together to result in for me. Now, the second part of your question was, so how can artificial intelligence help? I would say that the associated technologies of artificial intelligence, machine learning, these sorts of tools The way I see them is they apply the logic that humans use to make specific decisions, and then they can apply that logic at speed with an added ability to do it consistently, objectively, and leveraging large data sets from multiple sources, which would be hard for a human to do and have at their fingertips as they try and make those similar decisions. So with the way that artificial intelligence lays into all of those examples, and the ones that I haven't sort of brought forward too, I think they help us do those complex analyses. I think they make those unmade connections that are hard to make otherwise, uncovering trends we wouldn't have got to, improving our predictions, essentially gaining new insights. And I think as you bring them all together, my belief is that they're going to contribute to us improving treatment for patients, maybe getting in front of treating patients earlier, and creating a system that advocates for sharing and learning, a learning healthcare system. But maybe that's enough of sort of very general opening remarks about what this topic is. That allows maybe a springboard for my fellow panel to come in and give their view on that same subject. Maybe I can turn to the MEP Maria Manuel Marquez as the first person maybe to have a view on how she sees the digital healthcare services and the role of artificial intelligence, and maybe we'll just take it in turn going around, if that's okay with you, Christoph.
Yeah, it's perfect. Maria, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I would like to tell you that first of all, thank you for the invitation, of course. But AI is one of the most debated topics nowadays in the Parliament, linked to every topic: product safety, consumers protection, freedoms, or the lack of the freedom sometimes, and of course environment, and of course health. It's why we have a special committee with people from the MEPs from different committees participating in this special committee to discuss about AI from different perspectives. Healthcare, of course, is one of them, and during this crisis, it was very clear that if you have the good data, standardized data at European level, things would have been different in the control of some aspects of the pandemic. Why it's important to invest in AI related to health? As Chris told before, imagine you want to monitor blood glucose of a diabetic patient at a distance in real time and alert patients and doctors if something goes wrong. This is a very important use case for Europe because Europe faces a great challenge from a demographic transformation that puts pressure in health systems. So we can reduce routine checks, but increase earlier detection of more severe problems, not replacing doctors and nurses like in the movies, but empowering them with new tools and knowledge and information about some cases that is very important for doctors. So what could you do to help besides regulation? I'm not speaking about regulation, but we can discuss later. But I select 4 priorities related what could European Union do to help. My first priority is data standards and interoperability. Without standards and interoperability, there is no European data spaces for health for nothing. We need to work on the harmonization of standards for data at European level, including, of course, data collection, ontologies, and for systems in order to increase data quality. interoperability and access to data. And only you can do that in order to improve a single market for digital services and, of course, for data. Yesterday, I participated in an event with tech-savvy audience, entrepreneurs, and academics. When asked people that attend the event what should data capture and sharing standards care about primarily, respondents shows standardization of the data for sharing with other health systems. 71% is the most important preference of them. And also today in Politico, to give you another example, the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine stress the importance of standards to build health data space across Europe. For that to happen, you need to intervene in data governance. There is a problem of regulation we are discussing now in the Parliament, and later probably in a broader perspective about data with Data Act that is being prepared by the Commission. My second priority is safe experimentation. We need to experiment, not only to say generalities about data, but also to starting experimenting, joining health professionals with data scientists, AI scientists, and embrace a culture of safe experimentation. In Europe and sometimes in the Parliament, we speak like AI will only cause harms, even if nowadays our problems relate to AI, in my opinion, are mostly due to a lack of uptake, not excess of risky solutions. And this has to change, and the best way to change is to show with examples how we can use AI to improve our quality of life and, of course, our health services. The third priority from my point of view is to boost investment in science and technology. And the COVID crisis show how important it is to invest in our companies, in our research centers, in our startups, inside European Union. I don't need to say more because it's what we are discussing every day about vaccines. And last but definitely not least, we also need to increase, it's very, very important point, probably the most, with interoperability, two more important points. We also need to increase digital literacy for health professionals and patients too. There is no care without trust and no trust without literacy. First, for health professionals, as digital transformation is ongoing, there will be changes to the workforce. So there is, in the health sector in particular, we don't need to fear unemployment. There is a shortage of health professionals globally and in most countries. Equipping health professionals with digital skills will improve their performance and productivity and help them with some burdensome tasks and expand their presences in their patients' lives without winning them to the AI revolution. We want to be able to go far. And so when we think about a project, a prototype, an experimentation, joining data, analyzing data for health, you need to associate health professional from the very beginning in the design of the project. They need to choose. They want that for what are we going to change. And on the side of patients, and I'm going to finish, we also need to build up capacity. Let me remind that self-care and patient empower are big trends that AI may be able to shape in a more evidence-based way. And to keep trust of patients, also we need to share with them some knowledge And it's really important, both doctors and patients trust digital solutions. Yesterday, in the same event, in the answer, what are the most important aspects that digital solution in healthcare should have? In the first place, the answer was 93% that it is trust by doctors and patients. So let's bring everyone together and work on building up trust in the power of digital healthcare solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, for this great introduction of what is AI-enabled healthcare. Perhaps we'll move to a more technical question, which Professor Makoto, thank you for being there, Professor. What are the legal challenges to AI-enabled healthcare? And is accuracy more important than explainability? And should algorithm be held to higher standards than traditional medical providers? Professor, the floor is yours. You have to mute yourself.
Yeah, now it's working, sorry. First of all, let me say that AI for radiology and for many other medical disciplines is certainly the most important change since the introduction of CT and MRI in medicine. So what we see is really a huge change, and we see many companies entering the market and offering us AI solutions in the domain of radiology. We have many more than 200 companies in this market now. So certainly one of the big challenges is how can we as medical doctors know which of those companies we really can trust. Other solutions they provide, they offer to us, are they really working? And this certainly is one of the big challenges in this domain today. How can we validate those new algorithms? We know how our doctors work, we know how classical algorithms, computer-aided detection works. But for AI, for deep learning, this is much more difficult and it's less transparent. So what you need, and that's one point where EU really can help, is we need big collections of data which are annotated with what we call the medical truth, to be able in the first place to train those algorithms. This typically is something done by research corporations or by industrial companies, but we also need those collections of data and annotations to be able to validate the algorithms. And this really is something we are lacking today. So we need kind of reference data sets empowering us and our industrial partners throughout Europe and the world to enable us to prove that an algorithm, that an AI algorithm is really working and doing what the builder of the algorithm is claiming it does. And this leads us to the trust in the algorithms. You need trust from many different sides. I mean, the relation between medical doctor and his patient is a trust-based relation. But the medical doctor needs to have trust in the AI algorithm he's working with. And you only can have this trust if you have a really good validation of the algorithm. Then also, we have been discussing about replacing doctors. I don't think you can replace doctors, and most people will agree on this. I think, and most people think that AI should augment medical doctors. We are talking about the augmented radiologist or augmented intelligence in radiology today. Still, if you want to augment the radiologist at some point, on one hand, you might need to explain to the radiologist what the algorithm is doing and why he is arriving to a certain conclusion, which is difficult with all those new deep learning algorithms, but which is possible using certain techniques. But if you think more into the future, we might have situations where those algorithms are able to detect anomalies in our data sets and our patients that we as radiologists are not able to detect or even to see. And then it becomes really challenging, and you have to think about a really good validation of your algorithm. Because if you cannot explain how the algorithm comes to a conclusion, and if the doctor is not able to see the anomaly in the data set, in the image, for instance, this becomes a challenging situation. And that's, again, where validation is very, very important. So I really think one of the key points, and that's something where really we need an effort throughout Europe, is building reference data sets for the validation of AI algorithms. This is probably relatively easy in radiology, where everything is already digital and where images are digital, where we can have nice annotations with our images, but this might be more difficult for other medical disciplines. So then there was another part of your question, if the algorithms should be held at a higher standard than traditional medical providers. Well, I think in the first place, we really need to know that the algorithms work. This again is about validations, and probably you will expect these algorithms to work at a higher standard because you really have to rely on them. What will happen if you use those algorithms? It will be used at a very large scale. And so if you have errors in those algorithms, you can easily be in a situation where you have a systemic error in the algorithm and you produce errors at a quite large scale because you are applying your algorithm to many, many patients. This is not what happens when you work with real medical doctors, with live doctors. They also make errors sometimes, but they do not make the same error every time. So that's why you need those algorithms to work at a higher level of reliability than medical doctors do. So that's my statement.
Perhaps you want to add some things about this question? Janos, I'm sorry.
Yes, thanks a lot. Elmar, I think, has set the framework as to how AI could be deployed, I would say, in healthcare. Maybe just to make two little comments on explainability. It is true, and I do also support explainability, especially in the area of healthcare, because I think it will provide better understanding to the physician as well as the patient. Because in any case, let's not forget that the physician would need to obtain the informed consent of the patient before they proceed into something. So the patient should be able to understand as to what is happening. So there is already obligations there. However, it is also interesting to note that there is recent research which indicates that sometimes humans overtrust explainable AI models, even in cases where the AI explanation is not correct. So I think that adds, especially in this recent research, I think it adds another complex element, I would say, there as to this kind of traditional, I would say, debate between explainability and accuracy. So we might see that at the end of the day, it might not be so much of a debate in that sense. And the second little point, something that I think it was also actually raised by Elmar, that the AI would be making different mistakes than a a human doctor. And if I were to build a bit on that one, issue of liability as well, that because there was also the question whether it should be held at a higher standard than a traditional medical practitioner. We should know that the AI system in the aggregate could be performing better than the physician. However, we should also know and acknowledge that for each particular case, the AI system might be making different mistakes than the human physician. So in that sense, maybe the human physician, just to make it a bit more statistical, the human physician might be 80% right in this particular task. The AI could be 98% in aggregate. However, in those 2% of the cases that the AI would make a mistake, the physician, the human physician, would not have made that mistake. However, I don't think we should be also holding liable the AI for each individual mistake, because it so happens that it makes a different mistake from a human physician, since they on aggregate, the AI performs so much well better. So just two kind of little reflections there. Thanks, Christoph.
Thank you, Janos. Professor Alma, I know you want to comment, but I have to ask the third question. But you will be able to comment just
very short comment.
Very quickly.
I can confirm this even from clinical practice, that the best is to have a complementary between AI and the medical doctor, because in the best of all situations, they don't make the same mistakes. So you can tune your AI to be very sensitive, and then the doctors have sorting out all the false positive findings of the AI very quickly. This is one of the combinations that works very well.
Thank you, Professor. Janos, I give you back the floor, and Under too. The third question is more about law, and we have an AI liability framework. So the question is, what do you expect from this proposal? And the Commission may consider a specific sectorial policy for the healthcare sectors. Do you think sectoral regulation is needed? Perhaps, Under, you want to start?
Yeah, perhaps in terms of liability, probably Janos is best positioned to reply. But I think I can also provide a little bit of a broader view in terms of safety and liability of AI, and link it with the European Health Data Space initiative. Indeed, artificial intelligence and safety and liability are part of the scope of the European Health Data Space. And there, I think there are two main strands. I think Janos will elaborate on the liability one, but on the safety one, what Elmar was mentioning on validation is actually a very important component. And there, the availability of high quality health data is particularly important. And in that sense, the European Health Data Space is working across four priorities. The first one is related to the governance of the European Health Data Space, and how we can make sure that the data space is fit for purpose. And in this case, it should be able to provide the necessary data to train algorithms. So here there may be functions or services related, for example, to the creation of synthetic data, which is very important if we want to preserve privacy of citizens and patients. Another aspect could be also federated learning techniques, and how do we govern these federated learning techniques across distributed data sets, because it's probably quite difficult to aggregate all of this data in one single database. So that would be the part on governance, and also linking this to the existing infrastructures. We have the experience of the so-called eHealth digital service infrastructure, which currently exchanges patient data between professionals across several member states, but this is mainly for healthcare provision. And now this has to be extended for the reuse of health data for secondary purposes. And there, that's where it could serve for the training of AI. I think the second point would be related to data quality. It's important to work on verification of data, it's also important to work on mechanisms that allow us to somehow understand the maturity of the data sets that would be available through the European health data space. Because in the end, probably the AI developers would not be able to know about the procedures that have been used for the collection of this health data. So it's important to provide assurances and trust so that they can develop their AI algorithms and they can also then provide this to the market. Then the third one would be the part on interoperability standards. I think MAP Marquez was mentioning that healthcare is a very fragmented sector, so it's important to work on interoperability to avoid fragmentation. And there, as I was mentioning, it's also a question of how we extend the current infrastructure to cover secondary uses of health data, and also see how we can cover several infrastructures, because we see many different instances with research infrastructures that exist but are currently scattered. So how can we try to link them together and be governed across the EU with common protocols, with common rules, and common data quality frameworks? And the last one, I think Chris was mentioning it, also related to training healthcare professionals also when it comes to data literacy of patients. It's important to work on capacity building, and that would be the fourth strand of the European health data space that I think we need to work on, the 4 big priorities. And more specifically on the AI case, I was mentioning how the European health data space could serve for validation. On the one hand, for validating AI products, so that would be more services towards regulators. So here I'm thinking about notified bodies, for example, but also serving as test beds for companies who want to test, who want to train and test their algorithms. That was also something that MEP Marquez was mentioning. So how can we make sure that the European health data space can collectively serve these 2 purposes when talking about secondary uses? And then I think the other strand, separate from validation, but in a way also related, is liability. And I think there Janos can provide more input. Yeah.
Janos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, Ander. Yes. I see your question, Christoph, also concerns safety and liability and whether there are any specificities in the area of healthcare. So if I use, let's say, my time, I think, to map how the legal framework, I would say, how it could look like, and then maybe we take it in the question times to focus on different aspects that the participants would like to focus on. Most of the systems that they will be deployed in healthcare, I would say, they would be, most of them be considered also as medical devices, in which case, of course, before I move to there, maybe just to see exactly which, there is 2 worlds, if you want. One of them, what we could refer to as ex ante world, and the other on the exposed world. In the ex ante world, it would be obligations, if you want, or regulations which will be indicating what needs to be done by the manufacturer before they're even allowed to put on the market, to place on the market an AI system. So it will be their obligations, if you want to get a CE marking, for example, to be able to even deploy their system in the hospital. The exposed world, it would be when the system starts operating on daily basis, and then there is an accident, and then you look at the specifics of the accident and of the system, and then you start analyzing as to why the accident happens. I wouldn't divide the one as safety, the ex ante world as safety, and the exposed world as the liability / compensation, because even the exposed world is not only about compensation. It's not only the aim of the patient to obtain compensation. It's also about safety, because that also indicates there are 2 interconnected, if you want, worlds. I think that's a better way to see these 2 worlds. But if I just map a bit the first world and then the second world, and then we can get into questions if you have any. The ex-ante world, basically, as I said, all these systems, most probably there will be medical devices, especially after the medical devices regulation, which was adopted in 2017, and it's coming into application May of 2021. It will be capsulating most of these systems. It also refers to software systems providing predictions on medical tasks, for example. So as you can see, a lot of these systems will be medical devices, hence subject to comprehensive medical devices ex-ante regulations. In addition, I'm sure you'll know or you have seen already and read it, the AI white paper, which was published last February 2020, indicating that this year we might also see a new AI regulation. This new AI regulation would also cover safety and trustworthiness of AI. In other words, to put it a bit more legally simple, if you have a medical system, a medical AI system, it might be subject to the medical devices regulation, and possibly we'll see exactly the form and how it will be deployed, and possibly the new AI regulation. So you will have these two strong, if you want, regulatory regimes at the EU level that would be governing the performance, the safety, as well as the trustworthiness of these systems. Now, these systems are then deployed in the market at the hospital, let's say, and then they start functioning at the hospital, and we see the first accident. At this point, the liability regimes could pop in, but as I said, let's not only think that the liability deals with compensation. It's not only compensation, especially in healthcare, I would say, maybe the patient is not solely interested about compensation. He's rather interested about also the safety of the device. So these liability frameworks could be also, if you want, providing, depending on how we develop them, an extra safety net on safety. Because when it comes to the accident, you start looking at that specific medical device, at that specific situation as to what has happened. And basically, under liability regimes, the patient or the physician would be arguing that in that particular occasion, that particular medical device AI system should have performed in that way and should have done that thing, or should have given those instructions, or should have given that warning. So you get into these details, if you want, into these laser details, which again, they have to do very much, at least on what I see it, also with very much with safety. So that's why I said the two worlds should be nicely kind of collaborating and merging with each other. And a final half a minute on whether there are specificities in healthcare and also with liability regimes. This is something that we also examine in our team in the commission, because we specifically look, I come from the Directorate General for Health, so we look specifically on AI in the area of health. Of course, there is other teams which look at AI in other areas and more generically. We look specifically in the area of health. And a few of the questions that we are asking ourselves, of course, this is work in progress, and we'll see how it's developing and what our results would be. For example, one of the questions could be, is the patient expecting out of an AI system exactly the same things that a normal consumer of another AI system could be expecting? Or the patient has more distinct and specific expectations out of the AI system? Also, when it comes to affordability of AI, does the patient, or should the patient, or all patients afford using and be subject to AI? For example, there is an AI system which revolutionizes medicine, or that particular aspect. Shouldn't all patients be able to afford to be subject to that AI, compared to, for example, another consumer who might not be able to afford an AI supercar, and it's fine and it's okay? Maybe it's not fine for the consumer. Or for example, what it has been also raised before when it comes, and by Elmar, when it comes to AI, we see a more complex relationship informed. I would say a triangular relationship between the manufacturer of the AI system, the physician, and the patient. And these three are somehow need also to collaborate in this new relationship that is formed, which I think is also particular and different from maybe another consumer subject to autonomous vehicles, subject to buying an AI drone for pleasure or whatever. These are just some reflections and mapping. Thanks.
Thank you, Janos, for these great reflections. I'm sure participants will love to have the view of the industry, Chris. But I have to move for the last question. But we'll come back to the Q&A. No worries about that. MP Maria Manuel Leto Marquez. The last question is for you. Besides two regulatory proposals that we mentioned before, what does Europe need to foster the uptake of digital healthcare services? Regulation is nice, but what we need more than regulation?
Yes, of course. I told some things we need to invest in education, as Janos referred before, in the quality of data. It's very important point. It's the light here. It's very important point considering the need to prevent bias in algorithms. This is a very important point, and I would like to ask Janos about considering ex ante, what can we do to higher risk application of AI? Is it possible a system of certification only to the higher risk, not for all the application of AI, because there are application of AI to health systems without significant risk. It's an interesting point we can discuss, and if possible, we need to do that at European level, if we need to do that. Another point, considering the intervention of Janos, ex post, it's a very interesting liability, but AI products based are dynamic because there are software updates, because there are changes in the product during its life cycle. So probably we need also to invest in blockchain to improve the traceability of these medical device and other products by the digital products, as we can tell. So besides regulation, I need that you need to create a system for to improve interoperability standards. I don't believe it's possible to build an European data space for health or for agriculture only bottom up. Of course, bottom up, it's very important. It's very important to have modules. It's very important to engage health professionals, data scientists, AI scientists, and so on. But we need some organization, some push from the European Commission in order to organize this data space. It's my point of view. And I tell you, I do a lot of things to change public administration. And I was minister in Portugal before coming to the parliament, and I know how to do. It's sometimes is difficult, but we need to involve the professionals and the public officers, and I did that frequently. But also sometimes you need to lead the process, and this process needs to be led at European level. And finally, of course, in training and education.
Chris, you are the voice of the industry. I'm sure you will add some things. And Professor Couture, also, perhaps you want to add some things to this question. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. No, I'd echo the points that have been made already. I think we're in violent agreement that the importance of digital literacy, that access to data is going to fuel the system that we're trying to create together. And I think it's the togetherness that's the most important point that we're going to solidify here. There are many players in the healthcare ecosystem. It will take all of them to come together to continue these sorts of debates, and each of them playing their role. The technology companies who come forward with the ideas, the pharmaceutical companies who are bringing the medicines and the beyond the molecule type solutions, the technical pieces, the physicians themselves. You know, we're all creating this learning healthcare ecosystem. The importance of really encouraging that trust in the system, I think, is the most important, though, because we're talking about data fueling the system. We have to, as many people have said already, make sure there's good access to information being shared by patients. If I'm volunteering my data to be used in a secure way, that's what's going to train the algorithms that Professor Cotter described. You know, if we don't have the access to data fundamentally at the beginning, we won't be able to create this more positive universe. I think the benefits to healthcare are going to be truly transformational. So it's exciting to feel that the elements that everybody's talking about will be created over the coming years.
Thank you, Professor Cotter. Perhaps do you have a short comment?
Yes, I have a comment on 2 points. One is data and AI literacy and education, which is very, very important and cannot be overestimated. We really need big efforts in this domain because medical doctors need to be trained on these new techniques, and we probably also need more and more data scientists trained on medical aspects of AI. That's one thing. The other point raised by Maria about traceability of decisions is also very important. Let me make this more practical. What we probably will see in the future, when referring to radiology again, is that the radiology report will really change, and we will not have just written text, but it will something structured, with data fields you fill in. And probably we will see different AI algorithms pre-populating those reports, filling in part of those structured reports, and different algorithms will contribute to produce one report. And then the radiologist will complete those reports, give an impression, an overall impression, maybe recommendations, and doing a quality control. And then it becomes very, very important to be able to trace who contributed what. And I fully agree with Maria that blockchain probably will play an important role in this in the future.
Thank you, everybody, for this interesting discussion. I will open the floor to participants, and I can see we have 2 great questions. The first one is, can the panel, we wonder whether medical legal liability concern around duty of candor issues and diagnostic. How do you see the regulatory space keeping up?
You mean that the question was about medical liability in diagnostics and what would be the liability when there is a wrong diagnosis, let's say?
That's right.
I think it goes back to the point we discussed with Elmar, I think, that we have to first understand, as we said, that the machine will be making different mistakes than the human doctor, the human physician. So I think that's also an interesting policy questions, whether would be looking at the machine in the aggregated performance. So we'd know, for example, that when the machine performed or was tested in 1 million patients, it was 95% accurate. And then there is another, of course, instance where in that particular occasion, the patient, there was a misdiagnosis. I think, and this is my personal opinion, maybe we should look at the aggregated because that what it would be, at least as of design of the algorithm. I think it will be more beneficial to look at the aggregated when it comes to the design of the algorithm. When it comes to the specificities, specific, I mean diagnosis, probably it will also depend as to what type of information and to what type of collaboration the doctor had with the AI system, what type of information the doctor had, what type of decisions they took, what the doctor knew about it, what the manufacturer provided to the doctor. And this again goes back a bit into this, what I said, this triangular new relationship. So I see these two kind of different aspects, I think, on this. Thank you.
Maybe I can make a brief
Yeah,
addition.
please, you can comment.
I think it turns us back a little bit to the question that we had earlier around regulation of AI and the oversight that's required, because I think one of the things we were starting to tease out is what sort of oversight is required according to the intended use of the AI. So if I'm going to fully rely on this and no longer have the human intervention, do I need a different type of regulation than if it's a little bit of a softer augmentation and support? So this is going to be one of the questions I think that's going to be important as we start to work out how to regulate AI. Do we need really the same type of regulation for every use of artificial intelligence? And Janos, I think, was already teasing out the idea that in different industries, AI will be used for different purposes. In healthcare, is every use in healthcare exactly the same? Maybe for a diagnosis, if it's the only thing that I'm going to use, maybe that has a particular way that it ought to be regulated. But for some other use of artificial intelligence within healthcare, maybe the regulation has to be adaptable. And that's certainly how the devices regulations work right now.
Thank you so much. I see we have time.
May I be?
Yeah, of course.
Only a small, be a little bit provocative. What the European Union can do. I think that we need a European health policy, and the crisis is unfortunately the best demonstration that we need it. And also we need to empower DG Santé, Health Directorate, because before was not very important in the Commission, and now we know how important if you want to have a European health data space and so on.
Professor Couture,
It will be difficult to manage this point with member states, but for me there is no doubt that we need more power at European level to manage health systems in Europe.
Professor Couture, before I take the last question, do you want to add something on this?
Just, I'd like something to what Janos has been saying. We not only have to think about the algorithms and how good they are, how precise they are. We also have to take into consideration how those algorithms will be integrated in our medical practice. So how we are going to use those algorithms, what kind of data, kind of interfaces are we as doctors going to be confronted with? Because, well, you know, from modern airplanes, it is very important if you have highly automated systems to design the interface of the whole system. Otherwise, you are going to have an overload of the pilot or of medical doctors in the future.
Thank you, all of you. The last question is also very interesting, is how will data strategy and data act affect data usage in AI-enabled healthcare? Maybe under you want to reply.
Yeah, so I think the straight answer is that the main objective of the European health data space is to unlock the potential of health data across the EU. So what we hope to see is easier data sharing easier, data access, and easier data exchange. But of course, we're also aware that in the healthcare sector, there are a number of specificities that have to be respected and or have to be taken into account. And one of them was already mentioned, trust. And part of trust is also privacy, data privacy. And I think in that sense, it's also important to note that currently we're used to seeing development of AI happening with the data set stored in one database, and then the training being done on top of that database or on the basis of that database. But we need to move a little bit away from that paradigm and perhaps start thinking more about federation of databases and distribution of data sources and see how we can bring them together. I think that's a very important element, and that's at the core of the European health data space. How can we really make sure that we can bring together databases that probably on their own they don't make the, let's say, the critical mass to train AI, to test AI, but how can we bring them together? And that's why I was earlier mentioning interoperability, also the use of standards, because of course, if we're using different standards, if we're using different data models at each database, then things become a lot more complex. There are, of course, different ways and different protocols to access the data, but there need to be rules, and that also then relates to the part on governance. So how will we build the governance of the European health data space, and what rules will be applied to a large extent to the nodes that will be part of the European health data space. I think the concept of node is very much at the heart as well of the EACS initiative. Yeah, I think that gives an answer to the question. Yeah.
MEP Maria Manuel Marquez, do you want to add some things?
I totally agree with Ander. Of course, we need rules because there are problems of privacy, there are problems of the quality of algorithms, the quality of data. I said standards, interoperability. Without standards and without standard, there is no interoperability, and without interoperability, there is not possible to consider European data spaces even for only any disease. Because we don't know if the data are collected in the same way and with same criteria. And so this is the most important point. So we need regulation in order to improve trust in the system. But I hope that this kind of regulation is not a barrier to innovation. So it's very important this balance between the protection of some values, the protection of trust, because also there is no innovation if there are no trust in the innovative products and service. Trust is also makes part of innovation, but also we need to boost and we need to speed our capacity to innovate in Europe, special in this new sector of products and service based on AI. AI could be artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence, as Professor Alma referred at the beginning.
Good. We don't have any more questions, but if someone of you want to reply or add some things, or feel free to. Yeah, Professor Kutter.
Yeah, from all we have been saying in the past hour, I think the keyword is really trust, and we need trustworthy AI, and that's where the European health data space can really help us, I think.
So yeah, you're totally right, and hope we will see soon the liability framework in March, I guess. Chris, do you want to close the floor, perhaps?
I was going to say maybe one other keyword is confidence. I think we'll gain confidence as we start to, as MEP Marquez explained to us, do small pilots we gain confidence as we bring in a first example. We build from that one and we say, actually, we can start to rely on this type of technology in new ways with the appropriate level of governance and oversight. And if I bridge back to what I said earlier about us doing it collectively, with all the different stakeholders around the table, I think we can get past the things that we know we're trying to protect for, and create the better future for more rapid healthcare delivered to European citizens, which is basically why we're around the table trying to unlock this conversation. You know, it's a really interesting one. It's a very technical one, but actually the benefits to patients is what we're all about.
And for us as MEPs, it's very important to know about these pilots, because it's very important in our work to give good examples, to show to other MEPs, probably less informed on AI. When we show an example, it's very easier. It's easy to convince them and to reduce the fear.
Thank you. Perhaps if you have you can add a closing remark, everyone. Short sentences, 1-2 words. What will it be, please? Maria, just a short sentences. Last word.
No, I said what I want.
Chris?
My closing remarks.
Andor?
We need to work together, all together, scientists, lawmakers, of course, data analysts, health professions, commission, the council, all together. We need to work fast to improve our quality of life. At the end of the day, is what everybody wants.
We need a participative regulation. I totally agree. Andros, you?
Yes, I can only echo the words of Maria. Indeed, yesterday, or well, actually today, the period for feedback for the Inception Impact Assessment or the roadmap for the European Health Data Space closed. But this doesn't mean that it was the last opportunity to provide feedback. I mean, we're also foreseeing quite a lot of consultations. We're conducting a number of studies that will feed into the impact assessment of the European Health Data Space, that will also inform about the options that we will have to put forward in our regulation. We're also working with member states and other stakeholders in the joint action, working towards the European Health Data Space, which actually launched its first activities very recently. And we're also working with the European, with the eHealth network, which is also the current framework where digital health agencies collaborate together, as well as with the eHealth network stakeholder group, where several groups are represented. So we're very much looking forward to working with all the stakeholders. And that's, I think, my message.
This is perfect. Thank you, everyone, speakers and participants, for this wonderful public event. Thank you. The Center for Data Innovation is very happy to have this conversation about AI enable healthcares, and I will be glad to continue to exchange with all of you, speakers and participants. Please feel free to write me if you have any questions, and I will be glad to work on these issues. We have a lot of work to do. Participative regulation is important, and we need to continue to work for the benefits of all of you, businesses, but also consumers. Thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.